Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Northfield. My name is Lois Burns, and I've been a member of UUFN for 25 years and a proud UU for 65 years. UUFN is an inclusive community that nurtures spiritual and intellectual growth and fosters ethical and social responsibility. If you are a visitor, either on site or online, we are glad you are with us, and we invite you to stay after the service to get acquainted. We welcome your questions and look forward to getting to know you. Each month, we choose a different Share the Plate recipient for our offering. This month's recipient is Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light works in partnership with multi-faith communities, including UUFN, to co-create a just and sustainable world by addressing the climate crisis. During our offertory time later in the service, you are invited to give online or as the plates pass. Thank you in advance for your generosity. Join us next Sunday for the Audacity to Imagine Sisyphus Happy. As we continue to push the rock of injustice up the hill, we can find hope in the sheer strength of human will and in solidarity with our neighbors. Join Reverend Dr. Andrea Johnson, our guest preacher, who just completed her doctoral thesis on a distinctly Unitarian Universalist theology of liberation, as we reflect on hope when hope is hard to find. Again, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Northfield.
As we stumble along on life's funny journey, as we stumble along into the blue, we look here and we look there, seeking answers anywhere, never sure of where to turn nor what to do. Still we bumble our way through life's crazy labyrinth, barely knowing left from right nor right from wrong. And the best that we can do is hope a bluebird will sing his song as we stumble along.
Thank you. Good morning, all. I am the Reverend Sara Smalley, she, her pronouns, and I serve this congregation as its minister. It is good to be together today. Our opening words this morning are adapted from the Reverend Gretchen Haley. Today, God is running late, trying to find their seat, scanning the room for someone they know or someone they don't. God is feeling evangelical, but not in a judgy way, mysterious, but not manipulative. God can't stop thinking about the James Webb Telescope and the possibility that time is not linear, which God might have guessed from the never-ending urgency of some upcoming election and the likelihood that sometime next week, Halloween candy will show up in the grocery store. God is tired of grief and white supremacy and the warming of the oceans, and not to mention it's hot Why hasn't totally climate-friendly air conditioning been invented yet, God wonders. And of course, we're all like, no kidding, God, can't you do something about that? But God's hearing aid batteries ran out, and they haven't had time to order more. Or at least that's what they say when asked and can hear the question. But really, that last emergency room visit maxed out their credit cards. And their partner's been working DoorDash for some extra cash, but it's just not enough. And really, God just wants to be present and stop worrying about everything. Sing, breathe, laugh. We got you, God, we say. We'll settle in and we'll be present and we'll sing. We'll tell stories and breathe deep and remember ourselves and offer whole galaxies of gratitude for all this beauty, for an embarrassment of ripe tomatoes on the vine and full apple trees, zucchini bread and the US women's soccer team, for protest letters and entire villages of people saying, you are safe here. God, your creation is not yet done creating you, creating with you. Come, let us worship together.
The flaming chalice is a symbol of Unitarian Universalism. Each Sunday when we gather, we bring this symbol to life together. Please join me in speaking the words for the lighting of the chalice. Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to learn what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another. Please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 1000, in the teal hymnal, Morning Has Come.
While listening to National Public Radio last week, I was surprised and delighted to hear an interview entitled, "Why the Guy from the Office Wants a Spiritual Revolution." Rainn Wilson, who played Dwight Schrute on the TV show The Office, this guy, just wrote a book called Soul Boom. Rainn Wilson's book, quote, explores the possibility and hope for a spiritual revolution, a soul boom, in order to address today's greatest issues: mental health, racism and sexism, climate change, and economic injustice. During the NPR interview, here's how Wilson describes his spiritual journey from being raised in the Baha'i faith, which conceives of God as an unknowable essence, to rejecting all spirituality, to coming back to his faith. Wilson says, "I suffered from really debilitating anxiety. I had regular anxiety attacks that would render me lying on the floor in a pool of sweat. But it led me back on a spiritual quest where I was like, maybe I lost something by getting rid of anything and everything to do with spirituality. Maybe there's some answer there, go figure." Interviewer Rachel Martin then asks, "You described talking to friends during this time about what they thought about a higher power, and you were not satisfied with their answers. What were they telling you?" Wilson responds, "So I would ask my friends, 'Hey, do you believe in God?' Which is a great conversation starter. I would go to parties and be like, 'Hey, do you believe in God?' And people would gulp and turn ashen and bolt in the other direction. But almost to a person, my artist friends would say, 'Well, I certainly don't believe in an old man on a cloud, with an agenda scowling down at us. But I believe there's something more out there. There's some kind of energy, some kind of eternal creative juice, something going on out there.' And that was fine, and I was with them on that, but that wasn't enough for me." Wilson continues, "I know there's a God. It's not a faith thing. God is as real to me as my body is. Let me put it this way. Let's back up and get a little mystical for a second. In the Baha'i faith, there's a prayer we say every day where we say, 'I bear witness on my God that thou hast created me to know thee and to worship me.' And we say this prayer every day. We have been created to know and worship God according to the Baha'i mythology. And at the same time, in the Baha'i writings, the number one way to describe God is unknowable. So here we are. We have been created to know the unknowable." I love that, says Wilson. That makes my head sizzle with excitement. I'm trying to know the great mystery, to know the unknowable. That's a process. It's not a destination. It's not something you arrive at. It's an ever-evolving process of understanding what it is to be in the midst of life. End quote. We have been created to know the unknowable. And so today, we're not asking if you believe in God or not, so you don't have to bolt in the other direction, worrying you will have the wrong answer or someone else will. Instead, we're considering what makes your head sizzle with excitement. There are atheists in this room and theists, and probably more than a few whose relationship status with the divine is it's complicated. All are welcome here. You are welcome here. We have copies of the pamphlet UU Views of God in the back of the sanctuary, and a slightly different version of it is also posted on our Facebook page if you're online. It is, of course, a bit ridiculous to try to capture the complexities of the topic of God in a pamphlet, but I think this does a pretty good job of articulating how Unitarian Universalists approach this topic, not answer this topic, but approach this topic. The second paragraph reads, "Whether you believe in a concept you call God or not, whether you think God may be, even if you're not sure what you believe about God, your beliefs, questions, and doubts, your questions and doubts are welcome among us. Unitarian Universalists revel in mystery. Being in the presence of others who believe differently can help us examine our own beliefs, articulate them, give them new shape, and deepen and strengthen them over time. It matters that we have this conversation in community." There was a t-shirt created by UU religious educator Laila Ibrahim some years back that summarized this wonderfully. Its text read, "It's a blessing each of us was born. It matters what we do with our lives. What each of us knows about God is a piece of the truth. We don't have to do it alone. Unitarian Universalism." What each of us, it's printed on the cover of your order of service as well, because I loved it so much. What each of us knows about God, lowercase g God, not a proper noun, something that points to something else. What each of us knows about God is a piece of the truth, and we shouldn't have to go it alone. We make these connections, this piece of the truth that each of us carries, visible each week when we light our candles of community and share silence together. And so let's experience this truth, not just talk about it, as we move into our time of joys and sorrows. I invite you to allow yourself an unhurried, unclenched breath as you allow your heart to catch up with you in this moment. Rest in the embrace of a wider love. And in the presence of this love that holds all, we use our chalice flame to light our candles of community. We light our first candle as a blessing for the wider world, for our earth and all her inhabitants. Wildfires in Canada and Maui, a hurricane barreling towards the southwest United States that brings the threat of devastating flooding to California. Heat waves and more. It is hard to comprehend the scope of destruction. Something we love dearly, the earth in all its beauty, is being destroyed by climate change. People are suffering and dying. It is hard to know where to find hope. And so this candle is lit to ward off despair as we keep close in our hearts those suffering most. We know too that the details of our daily lives are sacred and important. We now light a candle for all of the simple joys that are sustaining us. And we light another candle in honor. Amen, and blessed be.
Our reading today is God is No Noun by Dr. Glenn Thomas Ridout. God is no noun and certainly not an adjective. God is at least a verb, and even that shrinks her. God is not so much a woman as she resides in the improbable hope of brown mothers. God is not so much a man as he is at work in the memory of my grandfather's laugh. God is not trans. God swims in the tears of the one who sees her real self at long last in the bathroom mirror. God is not black, neither is he white. God is waiting in the contradiction of songs from slave shacks, and I have seen God in the alabaster smiles of children at play. We're getting Michelangelo all wrong. God is not the bearded one surrounded by angels floating over the Sistine. He is not Adam with his muscled back pressing the earth. No, God is the closing inch of space between their reaching fingers. Don't believe for a minute that God is Catholic. For God's sake, he isn't even human. Have you heard the wood thrush when the sun glistens the Huron? Can you see the flowers, how they speak to bees without a word? Still, God is no spring blossom, no wood thrush. God is neither the sun nor the bee. God is what you see in the blossom. God is when you hear the river and suddenly discover how much it is a part of you. To be clear, God is not you. God is somewhere in the 14 billion years which have come to mean that you are. God is, after all, at least a verb. She is neither Pharaoh's rod nor Moses' staff. We must be the ones to cease our slavery. She is not interested in blame, neither does she offer praise, truth, gratitude are ours to breathe. She will not have your answers. She is too large for answers. She dances too wildly to be fastened to them, and answers are nouns anyway. God is at least a verb, twirling in the radiant reds of spring blossoms, singing in the rare silences between rapid opinions, attending the tears of dark-skinned deaths, learning in tiny alabaster smiles. God is waiting in the space between fingers that might connect. He is waiting for us to stop naming her. She is waiting for us to see all of him. God is waiting to be unshrunk. We will now gratefully give and receive our offering for our Share the Plate recipient, Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. This is one way we can make our care for each other and the world tangible. Thank you for giving as generously as you are able.
Broaching the subject of God is a massive undertaking, to say the least. And so what follows is offered from a stance of cosmic humility. Much of it is from and inspired by the book Sparks of Wonder. An apt motto says, "We don't know even when we think we know." So you're also about to hear the matter of belief in God in this sermon. The debate about whether God exists or not brushed aside a bit for several reasons. First, the do you or don't you believe question has been used as a pointed litmus test for far too long by far too many, distracting from the fertile creativity of asking better questions. It is so often used to say who is in the circle and who is out. Second, when people engage in an intellectual debate about God, there's rarely clarity about who or what the word God means or could mean, including experiential or mystical encounters that can't be put into words. In other words, if I ask you, do you believe in God? Whether you answer yes or no, I don't know all that much more about you than before I asked. If you say yes, I don't know what kind of God you believe in. And if you say no, I don't know what you do orient your life towards. Finally, we're pushing aside some exhausted arguments about God because spiritual development requires not knowing. In her article, Naming God, She, the Roman Catholic theologian Elizabeth Johnson suggests that all our conversations and thinking about God are governed by this primary rule: that the reality of God is a mystery beyond all imagining. The infinitely creating, redeeming, and indwelling Spirit is so beyond the world and so within us as to be literally incomprehensible. As Johnson points out, Augustine, the 4th century Christian bishop, warned that if you were able to understand, you understood something other than God. And as ever, I also want to explicitly state that the word God and the concept of God can be painful for many. For many of us who live with religious trauma, the concept of God cannot easily be separated from the concepts of judgment, fear, and control. For myself, part of the healing of that religious trauma has been thinking about and wondering at the possibility that the foundational truth of the universe is not the threat of separateness, as I had been taught, but the promise of connection. So let's proceed then, not with academic reflections about the holy, but rather with a map of engagement within the staggering freedom of our Unitarian Universalist tradition, a freedom to acknowledge the presence of mystery that exists between right and wrong. In his essay entitled "The Usefulness of Sin," in our denominational magazine, UU World, Philip Simmons admits that he is desperate for God, even though my notion of God remains fluid and impossibly vague at times. To explain, he refers to a story from Rabbi Lawrence Kushner's Honey from the Rock, in which Kushner asks some grade school children how many of them believe in God. And to his dismay, not a single hand goes up. He eventually thinks to ask a better question. He eventually thinks to ask instead, how many of them have ever been close to God? Showing no awareness of the contradiction, every child raises their hand. They tell Kushner about their closeness to God when helping their parents, when lighting Shabbat candles, when angry and sad at a grandparent's death. Too often, Kushner writes, we get hung up on the question of believing in when what we really want is closeness to. One of the most straightforward means of drawing near to the divine is through the metaphor of names and naming. In an interview in Spirituality and Health, Christian agnostic writer Sam Keen says, "This is the open secret. The emperor of this cosmos is everywhere present, but nowhere to be found. Nevertheless, we are impelled to juggle 1,000 names for the nameless one." God has an infinite number of attributes and qualities, agrees Rabbi Mark Soloway in his sermon, The God I Don't Believe in. God has an infinite number of attributes and qualities which are reflected in the many different names, as if God is a secret agent with multiple identities and passports. Among the revelry of symbols for the divine, how have different faiths attempted to name the holy? We heard earlier in the service that in the Baha'i faith, God is the unknowable we are called to know. Some of the many names in the Jewish tradition are El Shaddai, Adonai, Elohim, self-sufficient, Lord, mighty creator. However, in Jewish tradition, the actual name for God is considered so sacred and imbued with power that it ought not to be written or spoken aloud in casual contexts, lest it become an idol. Rabbi Soloway politically notes that the ineffable, unpronounceable four-letter name of God, YHVH, is a construction of the Hebrew verb to be and can mean was, is, and will be, and is imagined by the mystics as ultimate being and pure breath, which might be the only way we can actually attempt to pronounce it, with pure breath. Therefore, those who strictly observe this Jewish practice refer to the holy as Hashem, which means the name that is so sacred that to speak it would be to dishonor it. And no conversation about the infinite identities of God would be complete without lifting up Hinduism, which in some interpretations has 33 gods and goddesses that take 330 million forms. Islam has 100 names for God, although only 99 are spoken. Islam holds that God's final name, the 100th name, is honored by not naming, by silence. Tradition teaches that only the camel knows this name. For humans, the 100th name for God is silence. As this brief dip into the ocean of world religions makes apparent, the only thing more universal than an impulse to name the great all that is the agreement that it can never fully be known or understood. This is sacred work, but it can also be fun. What would it be like to engage in a fresh and expansive reflection on God's name? In the beginning was silence, Sam Keen encourages us in this endeavor to, quote, invent new names, use them once and discard them, stretch language to its breaking point. There are no literal truths in the realm of theology, so get wild and excessive. As if to challenge readers to a God-naming throwdown, Keen supplies these samples. There are many more. The quantum leaper, the verb that activates all other verbs, the one for all and the all for one, the eternal not yet, the double helix, cause and consequence, the source and sorcerer. This can be both an intimate and a subversive act, this naming of the holy beyond a powerful white man sitting in judgment. God is not so much a woman. God is not so much a man. God is not trans, but rather God swims in the tears of the one who sees her real self at long last in the bathroom mirror. God is at least a verb waiting to be unshrunk. Later, in that NPR interview I quoted at the beginning of the service, the interviewer asked Rainn Wilson how he knows an unknowable God. Here's his answer. Wilson says, "How do I know? I guess the best analogy I can give is that I know that I love my wife. I know that I love my son." And here we hear his voice cracking as tears start. "I know that I love my father, who passed away a few years back. How do I know that I love my family? Like if I went to a scientist and said, 'Prove to me that I love,' and they'd say, 'Well, we're going to do some brain scans and an MRI and a CT scan, and we're going to look at what parts of your brain light up, but that's not love. That's not love. And I will never believe that love is simply a chemical, neurological response in order to continue the species propagating itself. My experience of love is far deeper and more profound than that.' So that's the first step in knowing that there is a creative force in the universe, is knowing that there is love. I also know that there is beauty. I know that there is art and there is music and all of these things that are ineffable and transcendent and transport my spirits are footprints. They're handholds on the path to finding the great mystery. All of these things that are transcendent are handholds on the path to finding the great mystery. And so, I don't want this sermon to be just an intellectual treatise on God any more than I want the vast and vulnerable experience of love to be reduced to mechanistic explanations. So let us experience some images of the divine, some handholds on the path to finding the great mystery. We just heard about various views of the divine. Now let's view the divine. You will see a series of images in the hopes that one, at least one, will echo your own inner knowing about the sacred. If you have limited or no eyesight or cannot see what is on the screen now for any reason, my words will give you a sense of what each image is. And if God or spirit are not part of how you encounter the world, you are invited to simply be present with warm-heartedness and curiosity to those whose experience is different than your own. In truth, we live in the midst of immensities, says cosmologist Brian Swim. This image from the James Webb Space Telescope released this week shows new stars being formed. This is God as unimaginably vast creativity, God as at least the verb to create the stars. People were quick to notice in the image the detail highlighted in the red box near the bottom of the image. A question mark. At first, I thought this was a joke made by some UU somewhere when I first saw it, but it's real. Scientists say this punctuation-shaped object appears to be two galaxies merging. Questions the size of galaxies are a part of the truth. From immense galaxies to minute particles, from the biggest view of the universe to the smallest. This is a photo of the particle detector at the CERN Large Hadron Collider, which is a particle accelerator that pushes protons or ions to near the speed of light in order to answer the question, what is the nature of our universe? In the words of the person looking at the camera in this photo, I'm an atheist and believe the answers about reality are in quantum physics. I wept when I saw this. Indeed, Sophia Lyon-Fahs, the mother of Unitarian children's religious education back in the 40s and 50s, believed the best way to teach religion to children was not to say anything specific about God, but instead to stimulate and develop children's own innate capacity for awe and wonder. Water, rocks, trees, and a blue, true dream of sky. Maybe for you, it's the North Shore, or the Cannon River, or the ocean, a rainforest, or a desert, or a towering mountain, a place where beauty lives. What is the landscape, the holy ground, where you meet the divine time and time again? Or maybe we are called to focus our gaze on everyday things. The fractals of a fern unfolding. The way art changes everything. The way a pet brings us back to ourselves when we touch their soft fur and scratch behind their ears and learn something about unconditional love. The perfect buttermilk biscuit, or cup of tea, or ripe strawberry that reminds us of the pleasure of being embodied, and that our experience of the divine requires we pay attention with all of our senses. Like the sound of birdsong, or children's laughter. And then there is the visceral power you can experience as part of a group, especially when that group is fighting for justice or any other deep human yearning that stirs up our emotion. Reverend Gretchen Haley says, God is the call to be awake to suffering and the courage that comes from the heart being broken wide open. The absence of a sense of the sacred can be violent, but together we proclaim justice as a joyful, holy act. God, the truth, the holy, is not just an individualistic quest. God dances too wildly to be fastened to simple answers, and we dance with her. The poet says, God is the closing inch of space between, the closing inch of space between. What are you reaching towards that is reaching back to you even now? And when you and it touch, what creativity sparks, what tears flow, what longing is met. There's a story I love about the way the song Spirit of Life came into being. If there is a UU anthem that is spacious enough to carry most UU's feelings about God, Spirit of Life would be it. We sing it each week after Joys and Sorrows, so if you don't know it, the lyrics are in your order of service. The song's writer, Carolyn McDade, describes a moment back in the 1980s when, after months and years of meetings for Central American solidarity, an end to nuclear escalation, and all the other critical causes of the day, she found herself completely exhausted and almost lost as she drove a friend home after an evening meeting. McDade remembers hearing herself say, "I feel like a piece of dried cardboard that has lain in the attic for years. Just open wide the door and I'll be dust." Her friend lingers with her in the car for a while, not talking, just sitting, knowing no words can fix that soul-deep pain for the world. And then, when Carolyn McDade returns alone to her own home, she walks through a darkened house. She sits down at her piano, and this song comes to and from her. The way McDade tells it, Spirit of Life emerged not as a song, but as a prayer. Spirit of Life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. She reached out in despair and found the Spirit of Life itself waiting in that space of longing. In truth, we live in the midst of immensities. The beauty, the mystery, the miracle of this universe is beyond our comprehension, but it is not beyond our capacity to love. A capacity as vast as the distance between us and the stars, and as close as our outstretched hands. I snuck this photo from the back of the sanctuary last week while we were singing, "Put a little love in your hearts." Put a little love in your heart and the world will be a better place for you, for me. Just wait and see. Here we offer each other hope. Here we offer connection in a lonely world. We each come into this space with our grief and our joys, our struggles and our strengths, things we feel ashamed of and things we are proud of. And then we create music and community and justice together. This too is holy ground, where we meet the divine time and time again. Amen, and blessed be. Let us meet the divine through making music together in this moment. Our closing hymn, I'll explain it first before we sing, maybe dance. Our closing hymn is Sia Hamba, and this is a song our choir has sung in its original Zulu. So choir, we're looking to you to carry us through on these joyful notes. The first verse we'll sing is the one in the hymnal, and the others are printed in your order of service and will be on the screen. We are marching in the light of God, lowercase g. We are dancing in the light of hope, and we are breathing in, or we are breathing out, the light of peace, and we are singing in the light of love. It's a repetitive song, so you'll catch on. Please rise, embody your spirit. Amen. Can I get an amen? Okay, thank you. You may be seated for our closing benediction. If here you have found freedom, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share it with others. If you have dreamed dreams, help one another that they may come true. If you have known care that is tender and true, give some back to a bruised and hurting world. May you go forth singing in the light of love. We join together for the words in the extinguishing of our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. As we close our time together, we will sing words of blessing one to another. Please rise in body or spirit with your hands over your heart, holding a hand of those next to you or whatever posture is most comfortable for you. Go in peace.